Well, we still have people joining, but while that's happening, I'm going to start by thanking everybody for joining us today and for joining this event that we're calling the Big Fast Forward. My name is John Meakin. I am President of North America for Clarity. We're a global communications agency, and we are really focused on telling the stories of our clients who are really change in a big way through the use of technology. And, 2020 has certainly been a year of change, a year of huge disruption. And in the tech world, disruption is usually talked about as a good, but I think it would be wrong to ignore the fact that many people's lives and businesses and livelihoods have been disrupted in a very negative way this year. But in the midst of all that, there are many businesses, technologically savvy businesses that have, through one way or another, been forced to pivot, to refocus their attentions, or to otherwise fast track things that might otherwise have been on the back burner, things that might have taken a little bit longer. And that's what we're calling the Big Fast Forward. And I'm delighted that today we are joined by representatives from just 6 of those companies. And they're going to share with us a little bit of insight into the change that they've made, some of the ways in which they've initiated their own Big Fast Forward this year, and what their hopes and aspirations are for the future. Without further ado, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves.
Thanks, John, and hi everyone. My name's Chris BOAZ. I am the Group Marketing Director for GBG. So at GBG, we're a global tech firm that help mainly online businesses prosper and succeed. And we do that through a range of digital identity solutions. I'm looking forward to this, and thanks for the invite.
Thanks, Chris. And so my name's Adam Davison. I'm Director of Global Policy and Comms at Babylon. Babylon is a digital health company we created with a mission to make healthcare accessible and affordable, and to put it into the hands of every person on earth. Now, that is, of course, a laudable aim and lofty aim, but whilst it's not something we can achieve on our own, our approach has been to try and make the world healthier, and by combining and cutting edge technology, including leveraging the power of AI, and together with medical expertise on the ground to build an improved better model of healthcare and solve some of the bigger issues that exist today. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I'll hand over to Miriam.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, I'm Miriam Frank. I head up PR for What 3 Words. We are a location tech company, really an addressing company, because we believe that addressing around the world just isn't good enough. We're so advanced with the tech that we have, but we're still using old legacy systems such as postcodes in the UK. So we really focus on 4 key industries, which are automotive, logistics, travel, and also humanitarian emergency services.
Hi everyone, I am Valentina Bieser. I am the Global Head of Marketing and Insights at Super Awesome. Super Awesome is a global kid tech company. We were created with the mission to make the internet safer for kids, which as a mom, I can really relate to and love. We actually pioneered the kid tech market, bringing our clients technology that delivers digital media functionalities with a zero data design, which makes sure that kids are completely safe online. Excited to be here as well today.
Hi everyone, my name is James Watkins. I'm the Associate Marketing Director at Aussie Media. We're a media company based here on the west coast of the US. We started originally as a digital magazine, trying to tell stories that actually make you smarter and teach you something new, as opposed to the daily headlines of who tweeted what to whom. But over the last couple of years, we've also accelerated significant TV businesses, podcasts. In a usual year, we'd be having an annual festival each year in New York. Yeah, our TV business has now massively accelerated this year with partnerships with over a dozen networks now. So excited to be joining this panel and speaking with all of you.
Hi everyone, my name's Stephanie WILKS-WIFFEN. I head up the marketing team for eTORO UK. eTORO is a global trading and investment platform, and we have over 15 million users worldwide. Our mission is to open up the financial markets to everybody, and so we offer our users a simple and easy way to invest and trade in anything from traditional asset classes such as stocks and commodities, as well as new asset classes such as crypto.
Great. Well, thank you all. And, you know, here we are, security, healthcare, location tech, kids tech, entertainment, finance, what a diverse range of sectors. But what I want to try and do over the course of this conversation is to find the points of commonality. And perhaps we could start by asking you all to cast your minds back. And Stephanie, I'll ask you this first. Cast your minds back to the spring, when things changed pretty rapidly. And if I could ask you to be as candid as you're able to be, perhaps you could tell us how prepared you were for those changes, and what were the biggest things that you had to overcome in those first few weeks.
Sure. I think when we're looking back to March, I remember just watching the markets go absolutely haywire. I've personally only seen a couple of instances like that in my career, most notably the 2017-2018 crypto rally. And it was certainly a huge sign that there was a massive shift coming along, and we needed to buckle our seatbelts and really get ready for the next few months. I guess in terms of being prepared, globally, our trading volumes have risen over 200% over the past 6 months, and our first-time depositors have grown over 300%. But as I've mentioned, the crypto rally that we experienced 2-3 years ago really was another period of excessive demand, and we were somewhat prepared from that last period of volatility. During that time, we were almost one of you could argue, the last man standing in terms of crypto platforms, where we were able to kind of service and keep onboarding new users. And so really we learned a lot from that last period. And so our disruptions this time around have actually been a little bit more minor as a result. So I guess one of the big things we've learned is really the importance of always being ready for the next gear change. And so with that in mind, we're also currently recruiting for new, even more developers ready for potentially the next wave.
The next wave. Well, that's something we can all look forward to, isn't it? And I guess that, you know, being a global company and having users all over the world, you know, you were able to see a little bit of what was coming into Europe and North America as a result of what was happening in Asia. And I think Chris, that's true of your business too, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So at GBG, we've got offices all over the world, from San Francisco to Australia. So we've got 2 offices in China. And so we were experiencing COVID at the very start of the year, specifically in our APAC region. So I think from a GBG perspective, although we were not prepared for obviously the impact that it's had across the world, what we did see is how COVID essentially spread across the world. We were a little bit further ahead for the way that we dealt with people, our internal people, and also and customers. So we sort of learned from that and altered and changed plans as the days, weeks, and months went on.
Yeah, and Miriam, you know, I was interested in what you're saying about logistics being one of your big pillars of the business, and that is one industry that has been incredibly disrupted. How did you help and work with your partners and customers to help them overcome that, and how has that landscape shifted for you?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and I think that as a company, we are pretty unashamedly responsive. So we have had to be nimble and agile as we're carving out an entirely new sector, an industry really. So I think that something that really has spoken to that is how quickly we were able to see, okay, actually logistics and e-commerce is going to be the one industry that is going to be okay from COVID. But that being okay also presented more challenges to our partners. So we knew, and they knew, that they were going to have huge volumes of orders coming through, that they were going to have to deal with safe, no contact drop-off points, that there were going to be tens of thousands of new delivery drivers on the road who don't know their way around the local area. And so I think what actually happened is we saw that there was a huge opportunity that these logistics and e-commerce guys were after, which is we need a solution that we can quickly plug in to help us get through this. And so at What 3 Words, we really adjusted our resource to focus on the logistics industry. And, you know, like I said, we operate in travel and also emergency services and automotive. Those things really slowed down. So it was just a gentle change of scope, really.
Interesting. And I think that responsiveness is something that, you know, the companies that have coped best during this have been the ones that are able to act most quickly, which tend to be the younger, more nimble, more agile ones. James, I was going to ask you about that responsiveness, because, you know, as a media entertainment company, you need to reflect back to your viewers, your consumers, what's going on in their world, and presumably you had to respond very quickly by changing the type of content that you were able to produce.
Yeah, I was just thinking as the others were talking about how sort of having global teams sort of help prepare throughout the course of the year as this thing unfolded around the globe. I think while we have an editorial team that crosses the globe, we've often, you know, whether it's elections or other things, that there's always a hotspot somewhere that our editorial team is covering. And so this felt, you know, at the start of the year, it felt like, okay, there's something interesting going on that, you know, some of our reporters are talking about over here. But then as soon as it sort of came domestically to the US and Europe, we realized a lot of things were changing. But yeah, as you mentioned, being a relatively young company, we're about 7.5 years old, and an incredibly nimble company, especially with our core US operations, where we've been standing up, as I was mentioning, sort of TV and events businesses really from scratch over the last 2-3 years. We were able to move really quickly and pivot really fast. I think we, you know, always having been quite lean, quite agile, quite nimble has sometimes been a challenge for us. But you know, this year where everyone was forced to be, I think probably not having some of that, you know, full machinery of a huge company with massive departments, you know, we were able to refocus really quickly. So I think that was really key for us. Yeah,
and you know, that responsiveness is important, but there are other changes that take longer. And this idea of, a terribly old-fashioned term, but telehealth, Adam, is something I wanted to ask you about. This, you know, it's not a new idea necessarily, but you know, is COVID something that has, you know, accelerated that? And do you think that's something that is actually business?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. Whenever you hear telehealth, it makes you think of telesales from kind of the early noughties. But I think it certainly has. I mean, it was a slightly alien concept for so many people, and certainly I think from a healthcare side, there's almost a certain resistance. It's now probably moved beyond almost being commoditized to a certain extent, where actually it's not replacing one for another. It's just another part of a tool service that you've kind of got. So yeah, you can do telehealth if you need to do it, but fundamentally, where we're now at is it's to a certain extent. I think I mentioned previously, but fundamentally, it accelerated the conversation for us. So telehealth was something that we've been talking about, and there was a few others in the industry. But actually, you've seen lots of new business spin up just offering that service, when actually that's pretty much doesn't solve the fundamental issues that we were trying to tackle when we first created, which is that the healthcare system is fragmented. Doctors are in short supply. I think by 2030, it's estimated there'll be 18 million shortfall in doctors. So therefore, we have to try another way. And just by switching all face-to-face appointments to virtual ones doesn't really solve the problem, because you've still only got the same amount of doctors. So And for us, what it allowed us to do was it allowed us to start to kind of work with our partners. And the NHS in the UK isn't known for being a fast-moving organisation, but I think everybody has kind of spun into action. It allowed us to start having conversations that we've been trying to have for a couple of years about how do we start to bring together services so that it doesn't mean that the patient has to make a binary choice between a virtual appointment through telehealth or a face-to-face. It's let's give them the right information so we can get the right service at the right time, and also give them the right information. And basically it just comes down to how do you support a patient, which is what disruption was all about. And for us, that's kind of how do we bring all of our services together, make sure that the short supply of doctors are used for when they really need it, and how could we do that through technology?
Right. I guess what we're talking about here is a behavior change on the part of consumers and on the part of patients, if you like. And that behavior change is something I wanted to ask you about, Valentina. You know, here we are, you know, a lot of people, a lot of you and a lot of people tuning in out there in Zoom land have this, and very concerned about, you know, how their behaviors are being forced. And I know that you invest a lot of resources into research to understand that. And I wonder if there's anything you can share about what you've seen and maybe what surprised you.
Yeah. So our research is focused on kids and parents, but mainly kids. And we saw an almost overnight spike in certain behaviors. One, of course, everyone can expect is kids spending more time online. That's not surprising, but the spike was incredible. And it kept going even after the hardest part of the lockdown was over. But then other things that we saw is, for example, this idea of, you know, kids were forced home, were forced to limit the interactions that they used to have in person, think about school and the playground, and they kind of replaced that with online interactions in gaming. So they started using gaming not just as an outlet to play video games, but also to interact socially with other kids and finding that virtual playground. And this is something that it's a trend that had already started. It's something that would have happened anyways, but that was incredibly accelerated. And the other trend that it's not, maybe it's not surprising, but if you think about it as a parent and look back, you're like, oh, wow, this is true. And in a way, maybe I wouldn't expected it to happen this quickly, is that during the pandemic, kids became more and more independent. So during lockdown, parents were working and kids were in the house and there was no other help. So kids started having more of a say on what grocery items we're going to buy, because maybe they were preparing their own lunch. And that then snowballed into having more of a say overall in every grocery item. And kids, from the research we've done over the years, we've always seen kids having a lot of influence with purchase decisions, but it definitely increased during the pandemic. And the aha moment for us was when we kept looking at the data post the worst part of the lockdown, the numbers kept going up. So it wasn't something that just happened for those 2 months and then everything went back to how things were before, but actually kept increasing. And that's in a way that can be considered surprising, because a lot of people, I think, felt this is just going to go away in a couple of months and we're going to go back to how we were living before, but it has had lasting effects.
Interesting. Yeah, and it's actually something I wanted to ask everybody about, actually, is, you know, we have seen these behavior changes over the course of the summer, over the course of the year to date, and I think there is a general acceptance that things aren't going to go back to exactly how they were before. And I wonder, you know, what you think are the biggest changes that have perhaps changed forever. Maybe Adam, you can talk about this from a health point of view.
Sure. I suppose the fundamental is that an argument we've been talking about before is that we have to move from a system where we currently don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system. It's designed to respond to people generally when they're already ill. And obviously we kind of have to move into this kind of, as much as possible, we do it in certain parts of healthcare with kind of cancer screenings and various others, which like smear and various other things. But the COVID pandemic showed us probably that we can't rely on waiting for people to get sick and then deal with their emergencies. Instead, we're trying to switch efforts, and I know lots of organisations are kind of spend our efforts on preventing those crises and emergencies from happening in the first place. So we've learned to put emphasis on what mattered most, and we're trying to kind of combine that human expertise with the accessibility of everyday technologies and data to help proactively manage their health and prevent their crisis. In Rwanda, for instance, where we work with the government across the country, this didn't happen during COVID, but fundamentally we've tried to use smartphone technology is not commonplace, but feature phone technology is. So we started to try and find kind of analog digital ways to using an analog front door. So how can we kind of get Rwandans access certain technologies and certain systems through the technology they already have in their pocket? So we've done quite a lot of that, and we're continuing to look at how we can do that. But COVID, I think, has certainly shown the way.
Yeah,
I build on
interesting. And sorry, Chris, go on.
Just to build on what Adam's just said there, actually, is so I think one of the biggest shifts and Valentina, you mentioned this about more kids going online. I think that spans the whole generation. So there'll be a lot of older people going online that may never have experienced online or digital experiences before. And I think the responsibility for tech companies and consumer brands is to make sure that A, they're comfortable, B, they're safe, and it's convenient and accessible. And I think it's just fundamental. That will not change. That won't go back to normal. For the case of a change in behavior that's been potentially forced on some generations and some people. And I think, again, we're trying really hard to make sure that our customers are able to easily adopt new technologies that will help that change in behavior and demand. And I think that's really important when you look at the accessibility perspective as well. So making sure that no matter who you are, where you are, or what you're trying to do, it's easy, it's safe, and it's convenient.
Yeah.
And I think
and Stephanie, a lot of these people. Sorry, Miriam, please go on.
I think also to add to that, I mean, I saw a brilliant stat the other day which said from McKinsey, they predicted that we vaulted forwards 5 years worth of sort of consumer and business digital adoption in 8 weeks, which is crazy when you think about it. And I think that something we've taken away from that definitely, and as the other panelists were mentioning, is, okay, how do we make our product as accessible for all? So for the business side of things, how do we make our code as easy to copy and paste into your product as possible? But on top of that, we're seeing that, you know, fruit sellers from the East End and dairy farms in Yorkshire have this sudden appetite to use a crazy piece of addressing tech that they might not have heard of before. So I think that appetite, that entrepreneurship, the resilient nature of some of these SMEs in the UK is a trend that I really hope sticks around, and certainly our experience would agree with it.
Yeah, and I am going to ask you now, Stephanie, but you know, all these new people that are coming online that Chris was talking about of all generations, I think your experience is that a lot of them have started you know, trading and investing in ways that they weren't before. Tell us a little bit about that, and whether you think that is that something that people are doing just because they're stuck at home with nothing to do, or is that here to stay?
I'd hope it's here to stay. I think in the context of what we've seen at eToro, it helps if you look back into the 2008-2009 crash, where you could really argue that fintech and alt-fi was really born out of people's distrust for traditional banks. We saw the rise of lots of fintechs like Funding Circle, Nutmeg, etc., who allow people to access traditional markets, and they're investing in a much easier and transparent way. I think if we then combine that now with the effect of the coronavirus pandemic, it's taken this to an entirely new level. People are, like you were saying, now are at home and they're upskilling, they're taking courses. We run Learn to Trade and Learn to Invest courses, completely free of charge for anyone who wants to learn more about the markets. And we've seen the number of people adopting those and joining the courses and our webinars and our podcasts increase 200, 300, 400%. It's insane. And so people are really taking this opportunity now to not only upskill, but really take more control over their investments. And so for us, I mean, I've worked in the fintech and investing space for a while now, and one of the key goals is always about how do we get people interested in investing? How do we get people to kind of start taking this seriously? And it almost seems that maybe, fingers crossed, this year it could be the year where investing actually becomes a little bit more mainstream. It becomes more of that dinner table conversation, and where people actually want to engage more. And specifically, one of the most interesting insights that have actually just come to light a few days ago is that we've seen a significant shift in the past 3 months, although building slightly over the past 6 months, of women coming to invest on our platform. And I think anyone who's kind of familiar with the investment world knows that trying to get women to invest is historically one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. It's not something that anyone's really managed to nail, and it's certainly not going to change overnight. It really, in my opinion, it requires a cultural and educational shift in the UK and globally. However, we've seen the proportion of women on our platform move from consistently around 12% to now consistently being over 15, 16%, which is a huge jump of 25, 30%. And so it's really, I mean, it's got me really excited, and we're currently working on a huge pan-European research piece that's actually looking into the changes of people's attitudes to investing across Europe. So hopefully that can enlighten us to why we might be seeing this, but it's definitely something I'm excited about sharing.
Interesting. And you know, every crisis creates opportunities for somebody, right? And James, I was just wondering if, you know, you talked about the type of content that you've pivoted towards, and to some extent been had to pivot toward, given the constraints around production. Have you also observed changes in appetites for the type of content and the consumption habits of your users, your audience?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of trends that interconnect with what you know, a lot of the others have been talking about, as we saw in you know, March, April, May, just the huge uptick in people being online, looking for content online. I think there's a continuum between sort of news and knowledge, as Stephanie was talking about, upskilling and education. We're in the process of launching a sort of e-courses side of the news business as well. And so, yeah, we've definitely seen, I think early on in the sort of pandemic, there was just a huge uptick, obviously, in people searching for news topics, consuming news, like trying to get the latest updates. And I think it's been interesting to see how that's evolved over the last couple of months. You know, early on, it would just be giant amounts of traffic to like the most trending news portion of things, like where's in lockdown now, blah, blah, blah. But I think over time, there's been an evolution of that into people as they've got, I mean, it makes total sense, but as people have gotten more fed up, more bored, it's been less to the news side of things and more to the like premium content, educational materials, learning. You know, we've been doing a lot of new TV content during lockdown that's produced over Zoom, and have seen like that, even though it wouldn't initially in say March, April have been what was trending up. I think now we've seen people really trying to be a bit more discerning in terms of what they're looking for to fill that time, the content they're after, to upskill, to learn, to stimulate themselves at this time. And picking up as well on Stephanie's point about the makeup of those digital populations in terms of gender and otherwise. Yeah, we've seen a similar trend. We launched this new talk show on YouTube in August, which has been called the fastest growing talk show in YouTube history. And we have the YouTube team that we work with, which I think is the average sort of news talk show on YouTube, has a gender breakdown that's like 80-20, male to female. And our show now is like 55-45. And so it's a significant shift, I think, in terms of not just the volume of people consuming content, looking for content, but also the breakdown of what that looks like.
Yeah, interesting. So this idea of self-betterment that Stephanie's observing with the investment community, tallies with the entertainment world as well. And I think, self-betterment, the idea of taking control of your lives, more people online, more people spending more time online. I think that's common to all of you. And I wonder whether those things, you all have at least one foot in the marketing or communications world. So what are those big trends that we're talking about? It's kind of behavioral trends and societal trends. What does that mean for you in terms of future marketing plans and channel choice and that kind of thing? Maybe Valentina, I can ask you to talk about that first.
Sure. Well, for us, means first stop and think and ask our clients, where do they need support? And I think that has been a theme throughout the pandemic. It has always been at the core of how we operate with clients and through partnership style, but during the pandemic was important because we didn't have to pivot as a business, but a lot of our clients had to. And so how did we help them was understanding what their needs were and how could we help them and how could we provide, in our case, many times is the insights to help them understand how kids are behaving now, how things are changing. And so that is also going to inform and has informed throughout this year our marketing activities. What do our clients need? What do prospects need so that we can bring value to them? And the channels, of course, digital is important, right? So live events, for example, are not really a thing right now. So we're thinking, how can we be active digitally, bringing value and keeping people engaged so that they get something out of it in the end and they benefit from it.
Right. And Stephanie, with the demographic shift that you were describing, does that have a bearing on your channel selection, do you think?
Not particularly at the moment. I think whilst we're seeing this shift, I wouldn't look to target women via different channels than I would do men. I think, as I mentioned, it's much more of a kind of a cultural and educational shift that needs to be kind of imparted partly by the government at an earlier age than just targeting people via different channels. I think one thing again to add to the women investing slightly more is that people they're investing in stocks predominantly over any other asset class, and it really is a kind of enlightening us to the fact that women are really kind of investing in, and a lot of the stocks they're investing in are brands that they're using every day. So we've seen a huge increase in people investing in things like Netflix and Amazon and Zoom and things that people understand, rather than maybe traditional banks and other kind of big conglomerates that we don't really know entirely what they do, or if they don't particularly offer a product. And so it's been an interesting shift, because it was actually a campaign that we launched last year around invest in the brands that you love. And really what we were trying to do with this campaign was to try and challenge people's perceptions around investing being this opaque and boring and daunting world, and really flip it on its head and say, hey, why don't you think about investing in the brands that you understand and that you're passionate about and that you believe in? And I think over the last 3 to 6 months, we've really seen this kind of come to life, and particularly so with women.
Interesting. Anyone's thoughts on marketing channels or techniques, and are you doing a big hard pivot on any of those?
Just go on, Chris. You go.
Thanks. I think I really buy in actually to what Stephanie's just said around that educational content actually, and I think there's been discussion forums, community platforms and things like that, but also what you said, Valentina, about the fact that we're no longer going to events, so you can't have a decent face-to-face conversation. I think for us that's going to be a really important shift. So whether we create or curate content that can spark a conversation, that's going to be important for GBG. I think it's going to be important for comms and marketing people globally to come up with a way to have a discussion rather than just blast content out of the front door.
Adam, you have something to add to that?
Yeah, mine was more of a general observation as opposed to us changing channels. I think we've probably seen clearer lines drawn between the channels that we use and what we use them for, I think would be one comment. But I think more generally, the one thing that I would say as a comms professional is that what there was always kind of timings that you try and target to put certain things out on certain channels. And I actually think that quite a lot of those are a bit out of the window, because as many people have said, people are using and online in very different ways pretty much all the time. So what you've always assumed as a traditional try and time to target for LinkedIn or for Twitter or Instagram, or using all sorts of channels from YouTube and various others, they're kind of out the window. So I think we will maybe see those redefine again at some point, but as an observation, we've seen whereas normally we might have gone, oh, well, we don't really want to put that out now because we're not going to see whether it's not going to do as well. That's just, we've seen the total opposite. And I think that's partly because these things have been slightly out of the window as much as
I wanted to pick up a little bit on this idea of, brands being educators and there being this appetite for content that people can use to educate themselves. And I wonder what you think about the extent to which brands like yours have a responsibility or an obligation to educate the public about areas that are perhaps beyond your purview, especially with regard to COVID and the pandemic, when governments in certain parts of the world, I have to be careful, but in certain parts of the world have not been terribly clear or have just been, opaque about that public education piece. Do you think brands have a responsibility to do that, or is it something that it's best steered clear of? And maybe James, you can lead us on that, because you're the entertainment platform where people would tune in to get that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's been, as you said, not naming any names, although I think we're all thinking of the same sort of governments and sources. I think there's obviously been, around this issue and previous issues, a lot of new challenges that have been raised in the past 4 years about how to tread the line between not weighing in on certain issues of politics and policy versus, stating a clear stance. At Aussie, in terms of our political, we've always tried to bring multiple voices to the table. We call it multi-partisanship, and try not to kind of lean one way or the other. But there have been a handful of issues over the last, 4 to 8 years where we have come out and made a stance, and we've probably done that less so than maybe some other sort of news media entertainment companies. But for us, the issues around science of public health, for issues of diversity and inclusion, for issues around democracy, I think there's been more of those issues that we have felt, not just the desire to weigh in and say something, but an obligation to. And so it's obviously a bit easier for us as we're having conversations around those issues anyway, and whether or not we explicitly say this is kind of where we stand, what we believe. Unlike some other, businesses outside of the media space who might not normally be speaking about those issues at all. I think it's obviously different, but yeah, for us, we've definitely made several explicit stances in the past 12 months that we wouldn't usually have done, and I think our audience has really responded positively to that, even though that can be polarizing at times.
Yeah, indeed. Anyone else have a view on that?
I think from my view, we do, as technology firms, we do have a responsibility. If we're able to change and to shift things, then we should do, and we should talk about it. In terms of the COVID landscape and what's currently in conversations, I think from GBG's perspective, obviously we deal in sort of digital identity space, and that it can be quite a toxic subject, especially in the UK, and for various reasons. But I think our thought process on it is the government need to work with technology firms, and they've released some guidance over the past month or so, specifically on this topic, that is more inclusive of technology firms to get involved and to lead the way. And our position on it is exactly that, to help the government to provide our expertise, so there's a clear review for citizens to essentially make choices and to understand. Unfortunately, as we all see, if you leave it just solely to the government, they tend to say something either wholly inaccurate or slightly inaccurate, and then it just gets taken out of context in many situations. And I think that's really important. And I also think that goes, Miriam, the work that you and What Three Words are doing to help help an area that is suffered in the past through technology that isn't, or systems actually that isn't always up to scratch in certain parts of the world. I think that's important. Again, you've got an ability and technology to help. We've got a responsibility to tell people and to make a difference.
Exactly, and following on to Chris's point, one thing that I'm particularly proud of with What Three Words is actually that public-private collab, which I think someone questioned in earlier. And I think when it comes naturally, it can work absolutely fantastically. So for example, we worked with the NHS around building the Nightingale hospitals, because they obviously are in the middle of nowhere. They're sites that don't have accurate addressing. So in the sort of creation of those, and then also in existing hospitals, you've got to be really careful where you are bringing patients in, because you've got to have your cleaner entrances and your dirty entrances. So location is much more important. You can't have a pin that drops in the centre of the building. And so we worked with the NHS and the Home Office on those pieces, and it was just so incredibly rewarding. But I think part of why it worked so well is it was so natural. It wasn't us trying to do something for a PR stunt. So I think my opinion is, if it is within your realm, then it's your responsibility as a tech company to pursue it. Don't do it for your own clout and for your own PR, because we've seen people's patience diminishing for that over this year, and I think that's something we'll continue to see into next.
I think that's a fair comment. And conscious of the times, and I would like to include some of the questions that we've been getting through. And there is this question about public-private partnerships, and I'm just trying to find the question now. Any experience that you might want to share about any partnership that you had to do with public sector organizations, and whether that has presented challenges, or whether in a way your ability to bring that kind of modern technological perspective has enabled governments to initiate their own fast forward. And the Nightingale Hospital might be one example of that, actually, Miriam. And I wonder if anyone else has any experience of working with government or other public sector organizations.
I can give you an example. We work closely with regulators at their service to share our best practices and recommendations that might help them, because that's our bread and butter, making the internet safer for kids. And that, to Miriam's point, has worked really well, because it's a natural opportunity to put our knowledge to their service and make it better for everyone. So that has been very, very positive.
Yeah, interesting. And we've had a couple of questions about security and online safety, which is probably your realm as well, Valentina, as well as yours, Chris. There's a question about safety of children in particular, and whether you see the safety of children and vulnerable adults as a key aspect of work that needs to be done, and are there geographical differences and or socioeconomic differences that you've observed that are particularly pressing, that need to be addressed? Maybe Chris or Valentina can lead on that.
So for us, there's obviously a mix in that question, but for us, it's about making sure that everybody is safe and secure when they're operating online. GBG's customers have a responsibility to make sure that they're following regulations and that they're compliant whenever they do so. I think with the huge increase of people going online, that becomes a challenge, because usage rates, traffic goes up. So with that, you need to make sure that your systems, your processes, the technology that you're using is obviously fit for purpose, and that you've got strong audit trails for that as well. So one example, which I think links back into the previous question, is and probably what you were talking about, Miriam, about the increase in delivery drivers. So a lot of those firms will have to complete a right to work check, a KYP check, and actually a lot of the times that was done in person. So how can you do that completely online, whether it's over a video app or whatever it might be? So that is something that I think will always be something that we need to bear in mind, of how things need to shift while maintaining just security levels, whether you're whether it's a right for work, where it's buying certain products online, whether it's accessing certain services. It's the processes and systems that you have in the back end that the consumers don't see, that need to be watertight.
I think this idea of security and data security in particular is something that is probably common to all of you and all of us. And you know, that applies to our health data, Adam, and our financial data, Stephanie. And I wonder if, you know, this acceleration towards, you know, more people online, more people spending more time online has put a pressure on that for you and your businesses, or has it you know, accelerated the need to you know, bring your policies more up to date, or anything else that you've had to do to, you know, adapt to that changing landscape? Maybe Stephanie, you could give us a few words on that.
I mean, not particularly. We're a financially regulated company, so we have to have every single kind of data protection and different policies in place anyway. Everybody's mostly aware of the GDPR rules that came in a few years ago now. So that required a huge shift for many companies to really kind of make sure all of their data collection and storage policies and processing agreements are all up to date and accurate, and etc. So I personally, from eToro's point of view, there hasn't been any particular shift in terms of data protection or data monitoring over the past 3 months. We're just continuing as usual.
And Adam, what about the health sphere? Because have you found that, you know, concerns about privacy and data breaches are a barrier to adoption?
I think they always will be. I think whether it's changed what we have to do, I think we've seen, not necessarily in the UK, but we've seen cyber attacks on healthcare services kind of growing in regularity, and so therefore I think every health provider and health organisation has a responsibility to kind of really work kind of beyond where they've always assumed they needed to be, and really stress test everything. However, I think as a technology business and working in the healthcare space, we also have a responsibility to try and help build understanding and knowledge about, when we talk about data, what does it mean? So there's so much fear around, well, I don't know whether I want to share my data. But I think when you talk to people about what that means in healthcare, that means you being able to turn up to hospital and then know who you are. And often that is something that maybe at times we just assume is the case, but actually that's what we're talking about in data. So look, there is a long way to go. We know that people are kind of rightfully have concerns, and it's something that really, I think us as a healthcare provider, we have to do more to try and help build understanding, provide kind of provide that kind of security, and show people how we do things and why we do it, and be as transparent as possible. But it's incumbent on all organisations to try and help build that understanding and help patients and communities kind of understand what it means, and why when you talk about sharing your data, the impact that it can have on improving both an individual's health and population health.
Great.
Can I just build on that really quickly?
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I think that's a really important point, and it kind of goes a little bit back to the comment I made earlier on digital identity and that side of things. Is our stance on it is that it's really frustrating when you have to prove who you are all the time, and you have to start right at the very beginning every time. Even
I'm not
though,
a robot.
Yeah, exactly. And our take on it is that trust shouldn't always have to start at the very beginning. So it's something that we're keen to really work on, to make sure that you can inherently use that, no matter who you are, where you are, what you're trying to do. And that's how we see that evolving. And especially when you look at healthcare and in the UK, especially the track and trace system, you may not want to share all of your details all of the time. Some of it you just need to, but there are other situations where you don't have to. And we need to create an environment where it's safe, it's secure, and that consumers and citizens, businesses trust that data sharing. And I think also that convenience over privacy is also a really important conversation.
Yeah, and it's a work in progress, isn't it? We've had a question about content, and we're all content producers now. Here we are producing a piece of content right now, and I wonder. I think the question is about how you, as marketing professionals, think about content and what the content that you produce needs to look like. What are the boxes you need to check in order to cut through, given that we are all sitting in front of screens all day, absorbing and consuming so much more content and different types of content. What are the things that you're trying to do in terms of the content you're producing to really cut through? And Miriam, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we created our first TV campaign all fully on Zoom also, which definitely had its challenges. And I think that actually it made it better than it would have been should we have had a perfectly slick campaign studio to create it in. So I think something that we've definitely learned this year and taking forward into next year is actually rough and ready and raw works really well. We don't want these overly polished PR campaigns. We want to highlight real people who are using our tech, who have been affected by our tech, and we don't want to sanitize it too much. And I think that people are appreciating that more and more. So that's definitely something that we're playing with. And I guess taking one step back, that is also, it's sort of an age-old PR technique, but actually thinking, what voice is this coming from? So you can repeat yourself as often as possible as a brand, but ultimately, if you've got your story coming from someone else as a sort of real hero and an advocate, that is going to fly so much further. So I think rough and ready and also playing with the voice are two big learnings from COVID.
Stephanie, I saw you nodding along to that. Does that chime with your experience?
I was agreeing with we also created a television advert during lockdown, and so it was all created out of stock imagery. So again, rather than going to a studio and create something really slick and professional, we had to kind of change the tone of voice so it was a little bit more cheesy along with the lines of stock imagery that we could get hold of. And it was challenging, but it was really fun. And I kind of agree with what Miriam said. It's actually, I think the result was almost better, and it's going to be something that we continue with going forward. And then I think to the second point, I think the content for us, the key thing that we always have found that's really works well is it coming from the voice of our customers. So rather than us talking about the benefits of investing in people's stories and why you should invest and why this should be something that you look at to do long term, we really find that having our existing clients talk about it and having case studies really resonates with the media, it resonates with other people and helps us with our acquisition, but also in terms of brand building. So I agree with both points.
Right. Yeah, and it chimes with what you were saying earlier, James, about the type of content that you've been producing, where people's acceptance of something that is a bit more, to use Miriam's phrase, rough and ready is greater, but also they kind of expect it.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally right. I mean, as ultimately a content company, I think we have been trying to tackle these issues for a little while. I think in addition to I think audiences being more willing to accept, but also open to relate to things that feel a bit more personal and a bit more intimate and a bit less produced, because everyone's interacting via a screen and Zoom anyway, so it's kind of familiar. So I think there's been kind of breaking down of a wall there between the content producers and content consumers. But I think more an additional point that kind of speaks to the question as well is the fact that I think right now there's so much content out there. We use the term, our CEO uses a term of infobesity, that there's just so much you can consume. Yeah, there's just so much you can consume, and trying to rise above that noise is harder than ever. For us as a content company, but even if you're, if that's not your primary focus and you're producing supplementary content to your business, then it can be really difficult to rise above the noise. And I think one of the things that we've always tried to do in order to do that is to make sure that the stories we're telling, the messages we're trying to communicate are, I mean, it sounds easy to say, but really hard to execute, are different, are actually advancing the conversation in new, are bold, are bringing new perspectives to the table, diverse perspectives, because I think more so than ever, the disruption that's come this year in health, but beyond health as well, and in politics and social justice and other, people are demanding to hear from new voices, and I think are questioning their usual sources of information, and so are open to hearing from new perspectives. And so I think that's an opportunity for content creators to seize, but also everyone's trying to do it, and so you've got to really be premium and bold and fresh about how you tackle it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour. The time has flown by. And I wanted to end on a forward-looking note. We've talked a lot about 2020 as the year of the big fast forward, and I don't think that fast forward is by any means stopped. I think that's going to continue. But I wonder if you could summarize for us what you were thinking about in terms of 2021, and maybe to take our cue from Miriam, you could use 3 words to describe what your hope is, or what your expectation is that 2021 will be the year of what? And let's go with Chris first.
So for me, it's about momentum. It's also about courage and impact. Those are what I would. Momentum,
courage, and impact. Great. Adam?
Optimism, positivity, and irony, I suspect.
Irony?
Basically the first 2 comments. But
I wish I had more time to ask about that. Miriam?
I think it would be collaboration, inquisitive, and voice, going back to our earlier point.
Great. Valentina?
So I'm taking a totally different approach here. I'm going to say it's a kids-driven digital evolution, and that's because the way kids have been consuming content and expect to receive the content is informing how the whole family and everyone will be consuming content in a much more engaging way versus just passively watching.
Yeah, absolutely. James?
Maybe I'm a bit more cynical and pessimistic than everyone else. I've written down here, uncomfortable readjustment pains.
Okay, well, we can't all be optimists. Stephanie?
I think it's not 3 words, but I think we may see the return of some very traditional marketing channels. So like we saw the revival of the QR code, I think we might see the revival of some older, more traditional marketing channels like direct mail, radio, etc.
Great. And the great thing about talking about the future is that nobody can yet prove us wrong. But hopefully you'll all come back and talk about what your experience has been. I do want to thank you on behalf of Clarity for taking part in this panel. It's been fascinating. I could have gone on for another hour easily. But if people want to keep the conversation going, do use the hashtag #BigFastForward on Twitter. We'll be sharing highlights of the conversation with everybody who signed up for this Zoom. And so do please keep an eye out for that. And thank you once again to our wonderful panelists. Thank you, and goodbye for now.